I never thought much about closets until I realized one of mine was haunted. Not by ghosts, not exactly, but by a dress I could never wear. A wedding dress, still wrapped in its thin plastic sheath, yellowing slightly at the edges. It wasn't mine, of course. But it belonged to someone I couldn't stop noticing. The first time I saw her, she was bent over a stack of hardcovers in the back of the bookstore where I work. It was a quiet Wednesday, the kind where you hear the hum of the fluorescent lights more than the customers. She didn't look like she was browsing. She looked like she was searching for something lost. She was older than most of the people who came in here, mid-40s maybe. Her hair was tied back, but not tightly, strands slipping out like they didn't care about being neat. She wore a plain cream blouse, sleeves rolled up, and I could see the faint crease of her wristwatch mark even though she wasn't wearing it. That detail stuck with me. The way people leave behind little ghosts of their habits. I asked if she needed help. She startled slightly, then smiled like she was apologizing for existing. "I'm fine," she said. But her voice had that kind of confidence people carry after years of telling the truth and being believed. I should have walked away. Instead, I lingered by the next shelf, pretending to straighten books. She wasn't browsing aimlessly. Her fingers skimmed spines with a kind of reverence, pausing on titles that most people ignored. Old poetry, travel memoirs no one buys. She traced the faded lettering of one book with her thumb and let out the smallest laugh, the kind you give yourself when no one's supposed to hear. That laugh, it stayed with me. When she finally brought her book to the counter, I fumbled with the register. My hands, steady enough when unpacking boxes or shelving, decided to betray me under her gaze. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "You're new here," she said. Not a question. "Kind of," I answered, though I'd been working there 6 months. My voice cracked on the word kind, and I prayed she didn't notice. Her eyes lingered on me a second too long before she nodded, almost to herself. Like she was tucking away a thought she wouldn't share. Then she slipped her credit card across the counter. Her nails were short, practical, but painted in a soft, muted shade that wasn't meant to attract attention. She gathered her things quickly, efficient, like someone who doesn't stay anywhere longer than she has to. But when she turned to leave, her sleeve brushed the edge of the counter. The smallest touch, fabric on wood, but she froze, just for a breath, before moving on. And then she was gone. The store was empty again, humming with lights, filled with nothing but dust motes and silence. But the air didn't feel the same. It was heavier somehow, as if she'd left a piece of herself behind. I should have let it go. Just another customer. Just another transaction. But the way she had looked at me, direct, steady, and then quickly away, felt like a puzzle I wasn't supposed to solve. That night, lying awake, I thought about her laugh, about the crease where her watch should have been, about the way she touched those forgotten books like they were something holy. And I thought about the dress. The one she mentioned so casually, as if it were nothing. Still hanging in her closet. Untouched. I couldn't stop wondering why. She came back a week later, earlier in the morning than most people ever wandered into the shop. I was still stacking new arrivals by the front when the bell chimed, and there she was again. Same cream blouse, but this time layered under a cardigan that looked like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. "Do you have a step stool?" she asked, nodding toward the higher shelves near the poetry section. Her tone was casual, but her eyes avoided mine, as if asking for help cost her something. "Sure," I said, a little too fast. I grabbed the small wooden stool we kept tucked behind the counter, and carried it over. I expected her to brush me off once I set it down, but she hesitated, her hand hovering like she wasn't sure whether to take it from me. Then she let out a quiet laugh that didn't sound like joy, more like resignation. "I'm not as steady as I used to be," she admitted. Something in the way she said it felt heavier than the words themselves. I stepped up onto the stool instead, reaching for the spine she pointed out. A slim book, its jacket faded into soft blues. When I handed it to her, our fingers almost touched, and she pulled back a fraction too quickly. She flipped the book open, her lips moving silently as if testing the words. Her hand trembled just slightly at the corner of the page, and when she noticed me watching, she closed the book sharply and pressed it to her chest. "You like poetry?" I asked, trying to break the silence. "I used to," she said. No elaboration. Her eyes flicked to the window, where the light was spilling in harsh rectangles across the floor. The lines around her eyes looked deeper in that brightness, and for a moment she seemed unbearably tired. I wanted to ask more, what happened, why used to, but instead I found myself noticing small things. The way she rubbed her thumb over the edge of the book like she was soothing herself. The faint scent of coffee clinging to her cardigan. The way her laugh never quite reached her eyes. She caught me staring. Not angrily, just long enough for me to look away, heat crawling up my neck. Then, softer than before, she said, "You're very observant." It wasn't a compliment. It was almost a warning. Still, she lingered at the counter when I rang her up, fingers drumming lightly against the wood, as if she was holding back words she wouldn't let herself say. Finally, she slipped the book into her bag, gave me a faint smile, and turned to leave. But just before she pushed open the door, she paused. Her hand stayed on the handle a second too long. Her shoulders shifted, as though she might turn back. She didn't. The door closed softly behind her, but the pause, that hesitation, stayed with me. It felt like a door left half open in my chest. It was raining the next time she came in. Not a gentle drizzle, the kind of storm that drove people to wait it out under awnings and inside coffee shops. The bookstore felt smaller that night, walls closer, the air damp with the smell of wet coats and paper. She slipped in with her umbrella folded against her side, drops of water clinging to the hem of her jeans. "You're still open?" she asked, brushing her hair back from her face. Her voice carried a mix of relief and apology. "Another half hour," I said. She nodded, then wandered toward the back where the shelves rose higher, darker. I followed with a mop to catch the trail of water her umbrella left behind, though I didn't really care about the floor. It was the excuse that let me stay nearby. The storm outside thundered against the windows, rattling the old panes. She stopped in the poetry aisle again, fingers hovering over the books without touching them. I leaned the mop against the wall. "Power ever go out here during storms?" she asked, almost like she wanted the conversation to stretch longer than necessary. "Once," I said. "We lit candles. Everyone left except one man who sat in the corner reading by candlelight. Said it was the first time the words felt alive." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "I believe that." There was a long pause. The rain hammered harder. I should have stepped away, but instead I stayed there, close enough to see the droplets drying on her sleeve. "You look tired," I said before I could stop myself. She stilled. Slowly, she set the book back on the shelf. "Do I?" I regretted saying it, but she didn't sound offended. "More exposed." "A little," I admitted. For a second, something cracked in her expression, like she was about to confess something. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and exhaled sharply through her nose. Her hand brushed her forehead, and she gave a small laugh that didn't match her eyes. "Too much coffee, not enough sleep. That's all." But I didn't believe her. The silence between us stretched, the storm outside sealing us in. My shoulder almost touched hers when I reached for a book on the higher shelf, though I didn't need it. The closeness made the air heavier, charged. She didn't move away. Then her phone buzzed. The sound was jarring in the quiet. She fumbled to silence it, but not before I saw the name flash across the screen, Daniel. Her hand tightened around the phone, knuckles white, before she shoved it deep into her bag. "Sorry," she murmured, already stepping back. The distance reasserted itself, as though a rope had been pulled taut between us. I wanted to say something, ask who he was, why her voice had faltered, but the words stuck. Instead, I forced a smile. "Storm should pass soon." She nodded, eyes lowered. For a moment, her hand brushed the edge of the counter, lingering just an inch from mine. Neither of us moved closer. Neither of us moved away. The storm roared louder, and still, that space between our hands felt louder than everything else. It was near closing again, another evening where she stayed long past the usual drift of customers. The rain had cleared, but the windows still fogged from the warmth inside meeting the night chill outside. She sat at the back table, a slim book of poems open in front of her, though she hadn't turned a page in nearly 20 minutes. I busied myself with the register, the broom, the mindless tasks that should have filled the silence. But every time I looked up, she was still there. Her posture stiff, her hand cupping her chin, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Finally, I carried a box of new arrivals toward her section. I didn't need to shelve them right then, but something pulled me closer. When I passed her table, she looked up suddenly, as though I'd startled her out of some place far away. "You don't close for another 15 minutes, do you?" she asked. "No," I said. My voice was softer than I intended. She nodded, then closed the book gently, pressing her palm against the cover like she was holding something in place. "I should go," she murmured, though she didn't move. The air between us thickened. She looked at me, really looked, and it was unbearable. Long enough that my chest tightened, but not long enough to understand what she was searching for. Finally she spoke. "What are we doing?" The words weren't sharp, but they hit with the weight of a hammer. I swallowed. "I don't know." Her eyes softened, but the lines around them deepened. She leaned back slightly, folding her arms as though she was protecting herself. "This isn't normal." "I know," I said again. We sat in silence. The hum of the lights, the faint tap of the radiator, it all seemed louder than us. My mind scrambled for something to break the tension, but everything felt false. So I didn't move. Her gaze dropped to the table, to her hands folded tight together. Her nails dug faint crescents into her own skin. She whispered, almost to herself, "I shouldn't even be here." Something inside me lurched. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but my throat closed up. Instead, I managed, "But you are." She laughed once, hollow, and shook her head. "You're too young to understand." The words stung, but there was no malice in them. Just exhaustion. I wanted to tell her that I did understand, at least the part where she looked like she was carrying something she couldn't set down. But I couldn't. The silence grew again, heavier, denser, until it felt like it pressed both of us against the walls. She finally stood, slipping her bag over her shoulder. For a second, her hand rested on the chair back, and she didn't move. Her lips parted, then closed again. When she turned toward the door, she said it so quietly I almost didn't hear. "I don't know what scares me more, staying or leaving." And then she was gone. She didn't come back for almost 2 weeks. Long enough that I convinced myself it was over, that the silence she'd left me with had been final. I started shelving books slower, scanning every face that walked in, half expecting hers, half dreading it. And then one late afternoon, there she was. Standing by the travel section, holding her phone in one hand like it weighed too much. I almost didn't approach her. But she looked up, saw me, and for the first time her smile was immediate, not guarded, not careful. Just brief and real. "You disappeared," I said before I could stop myself. Her smile faltered. She slipped the phone into her bag. "I know. I needed space." I nodded. There was nothing else to do with that. I should have left it there, let the silence win. But she lingered, and I felt her wanting me to ask. So I did. "Are you okay?" The question sat between us. Too big, too personal. Her hand went to the strap of her bag, fingers tightening. She let out a breath and said, "Not really." She moved toward the back tables without waiting for me, as though she'd already decided this conversation wasn't going to happen in the open. I followed, hard hammering. When she sat, she didn't look at me right away. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag and placed it on the table, smoothing the creases. It was a photograph. A man in a suit, smiling at the camera. Next to him, her, years younger, hair longer, eyes brighter. "My husband," she said quietly. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. There was no ring on her hand now. He died, she continued. Her tone wasn't dramatic, just steady, as if she'd rehearsed the words too many times. 8 years ago. Car accident. He was on his way home from work. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, closed. The silence stretched until she gave a faint laugh that sounded closer to a sob. You remind me of him, she said finally. Not in looks. In the way you hesitate. He used to do that. Always careful with words, like he was afraid they'd break something. Her eyes met mine then, and it felt like the air shifted. The weight of what she'd carried here all this time settled between us, altering everything I thought I knew about her distance, her pauses, her unspoken hesitations. I shouldn't have told you that, she whispered, pushing the photo back into her bag. It's unfair. But it was too late. The words had already lodged inside me. When she stood, her hand brushed the table once, not reaching for me, not pulling away either. And all I could think was, the space between us wasn't just charged anymore. It was haunted. The photo stayed with me. For days after she showed it to me, I couldn't open a book, couldn't sleep, without seeing the smile of the man who came before me, the one she had loved, the one who would always exist between us. When she finally came back, the shop was almost empty, the sky outside folding into dusk. She moved slowly down the aisles, not searching, not pretending to. Just being there. When she reached the counter, she didn't set a book down. She only said, Do you mind if I sit a while? I nodded, and she chose the back corner again. I joined her after a few minutes, more nervous than I should have been. We sat across from each other, the table bare. At first, the silence was unbearable. Then, somehow, it softened, like we were sharing something without words. Finally, she said, I don't know why I keep coming here. You don't have to explain, I answered. Her eyes found mine, steady but tired. But I should. You're kind to me. Too kind. She paused, pressing her lips together before continuing. I haven't let anyone close in a long time. And now. She stopped, shaking her head. Now I'm afraid. I leaned forward slightly, careful, not wanting to push. Afraid of what? Her laugh was thin, brittle. Of feeling something again. Of betraying a memory. Of starting something that can't be finished. Her honesty stripped the air between us. For a moment neither of us moved. I thought about all the things I wanted to say, that I wasn't him, that I didn't want to replace him, that I only wanted the space she'd already given me. But the words were too clumsy. So instead, I reached across the table, slowly, and let my hand rest near hers. She didn't move. Her fingers trembled once, then stilled. After a long pause, she turned her palm up and let it brush against mine. Not a grasp. Not even a real touch. Just the barest press of skin to skin, like a secret passed in silence. We sat like that. No declarations, no promises. Just breathing the same air, letting the weight of everything unsaid settle in around us. Her eyes softened, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look guarded. She just looked human, flawed, exhausted, alive. This isn't simple, she whispered. I know, I said. And it won't be easy. I don't expect it to be. Her fingers lingered against mine, then curled just slightly, enough to hold the smallest, gentlest claim. The clock on the wall ticked louder in the stillness, the store empty but for us. And in that moment I understood, whatever this was, messy, unplanned, imperfect, it had already begun. She closed her eyes, leaning forward until her forehead rested against her folded hand, close enough that I could feel her breath stir the air. Neither of us spoke again. We didn't need to. The silence was the answer. It's strange, looking back now, how ordinary those days seemed. A bookstore. A woman who came in too often. A younger man who noticed too much. Nothing dramatic, nothing anyone else would have pointed at and called remarkable. And yet, everything shifted in those silences, in the pauses that stretched too long, in the words neither of us quite said. I think about her often, not in the way of obsession anymore, but with a kind of reverence. She showed me something I didn't know I needed to see. That love isn't always about beginnings, or fireworks, or the clean edges of a perfect story. Sometimes, love is the courage to sit in your own brokenness beside someone else's, without asking them to fix it. When she first walked in, I only saw the surface, a woman older, distant, hard to read. What I didn't see was the weight she carried, the years folded into her silence, the loss that had reshaped her life. And maybe what she didn't see in me was how much I longed to be taken seriously, how much I feared being dismissed as too young, too inexperienced, too temporary. We gave each other that, in our own flawed way, permission. She gave me permission to grow into myself, to sit with discomfort without running from it. And maybe, in some small way, I gave her permission to feel again, even if it scared her. We never named it. Not once. There was no grand confession, no kiss under stormy skies. Just her hand resting against mine one evening, her forehead leaning toward me in quiet surrender, both of us breathing through the fear of what it meant. And maybe that was enough. The wedding dress she once told me about, the one that still hangs in her closet, untouched, no longer haunts me. I don't picture it as a ghost anymore. I see it as what it is, proof that love can exist more than once, that memory doesn't erase the present, and that carrying the past doesn't mean you stop moving forward. If you asked me what happened after, I couldn't tell you in neat chapters. We didn't suddenly become a couple. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. But we kept meeting, kept talking, kept sitting in that space where silence spoke louder than touch. And it was enough to change both of us. So here I am, years later, telling you a story that still feels like it belongs to me, though it was never fully mine. Because love, real love, isn't always about claiming someone. Sometimes it's about witnessing them, fully, without flinching. And I was lucky enough to witness her. Sparkles, if this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?